here
Again?
again, beautiful Reverend Ellyn Kravette. Thank you for joining us here in Costa Rica today.
It's always my pleasure. It's my pleasure to be in Costa Rica, number one, and to see you always makes it absolutely an incredible experience.
It's such a pleasure to hang out, isn't it? We've had a great time.
Yeah.
So, what I wanted to talk about, what I had in mind was to talk about intuition.
Mm-hmm.
But I see intuition being the same as consciousness and about following our spirit, following what you might consider God's will, and doing what we're meant to do, what is maybe our purpose or what's inside of us. And rather than following the logic mind, so that's where I wanted to go with this interview, is to talk about maybe if you could give us even some examples in your life where logically it wouldn't make sense that you would do something, but inside of you, you felt like, I know I need to do this, and I know it might not be popular.
You see, I think it's really important that you've defined what you think intuition is, and that you define it as a consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good that we have two different viewpoints here, because I would define intuition as an unconsciousness.
Oh, really? And how so?
Because it's an instinct, and it transcends by itself the intelligence and the knowing mind. It just simply is a knowing. And it doesn't question, it doesn't think.
So if you were getting a message from your spirit or from God, would that not be the same? Would that not be, how would you know?
Because if I get a message from spirit, only one spirit, in the way I think about spirit, I think there's only one and we're a part of it. So if there is a message, it's a release of a message. It's not a message that comes from the outside in. It's something that comes from the inside out. Because if we're all one, and when we come here, we talk about this sense of separation from the one, and then spend our entire lives getting rid of the separation.
Yeah.
You see, then the instinct is a release of what we're already a part of. And God is not there. God, or spirit, or whatever you choose to call it, is this joy of knowing your connectedness. And I think sometimes in life, we do things, I know it's been my experience, there are some things that I've done in life simply because I knew that I needed to do it, and I didn't know why, and it didn't make any difference. And thinking of, I'm thinking of a marriage, or marriages, where you do things for reasons that you think you're doing them, but ultimately when you look back and you see how significant they have been in your life, you would have not known. You would have not had the maturity. You would have not had the understanding or the comprehension of why it was significant in your life.
So learning from
your
It's like-
experiences.
okay.
And sometimes I think all of us, we do things and we think this is why we're doing it. And when you look back and you think, God, that was why I needed that. It had nothing to do with what I thought. But yeah, I can see the significance of it. When I married my second husband, we were a family that was involved in alcoholism. And I learned everything I needed to know for the foundation of my life going forward. And for the reasons I thought I was marrying him were so different.
And at some point, it might seem like, wow, this was a disaster. This isn't something I should have done. And then
Or
look
it
back.
felt like it was a disaster.
Felt like. But there's so much learning in that.
We were talking about painful marriages.
Painful marriages. Everyone knows about that.
And as we were ultimately talking about, sometimes, doing things that we think that we were doing for a reason, and then finding out later in life that it was not the reason we thought, that there was a higher usage of it. But I think that also comes from being somebody that consciously, when you use the word consciously, there is that piece of it, of consciously being willing to learn from our moments by not being so busy that one does not give themselves time to think.
Or blaming,
That's right.
not accepting responsibility.
That's right. That's right. You have to leave that victim consciousness of thinking that life happens to you.
Right.
And knowing that everything that happens to you is there for a reason, and that if you, this is basic psychology, if you don't learn, you just will keep repeating and repeating and repeating until you can get to the next step. And that's true, what you said, that word responsibility. You have to take responsibility for everything in your life without judgment. You see, that's the key, without judgment. Knowing that it all fits into something and that nothing is good or bad.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing, is it's really difficult not to judge it. It's really easy to say to ourselves, why should I have to accept that responsibility? Why should I have to? It seems like the other person gets left off the hook, but it's not about the other person.
It's about my relationship to the other person. It's about my relationship to everything that is. Mm-hmm. It's my relationship to everything I experience. I always like to go back to the story of Adam and Eve. It's one of my favorite allegories, if you will, because God says to name the animals, to name things. It's because we name something, it doesn't mean that's its name, And but when we name something, what we're claiming is that we have a relationship to something. So every time we have a word for something, we are saying we're in some kind of relationship. We have some kind of thought. We have some kind of connection. And if we understand without judgment that we can use anything for what we judge to be good or judge to be bad, I think one of the things that's so interesting in being in Costa Rica, and I think one of the things that's so important about traveling, is that being with different cultures, there are different attributes to different actions or to different ways of living. And one can see where it really is all made up and that things are cultural. I was on a conference call the other day. And, oh no, I wasn't. It was, as a matter of fact, it was in church. I often go to the Unitarian Universalist Church. And they were talking about things being cultural. And I live in Pennsylvania. And I grew up in New York. And in New York, culturally, for me, what has been so instrumental as a part of my living is that I hear things in terms of the bottom line. And when I moved to Pennsylvania and I asked somebody how they were, they spend a lot of time talking, and I'm standing there thinking, well, you just get to the bottom line. But in everything, like when I go to school and you have to read a chapter, I read the summary first. I want to know the bottom line, and then give me the filler.
Right, okay.
And then I'll see where the filler fits in. But it's the bottom line which really makes a difference to me. So that's the kind of the way I think about things.
Right, and culturally, for some other people, it might be the experience of going through the...
You need to ask about the family and all the children, and, it's like, I want to know, are you living or dead? It's the bottom line. How we think about things has to do a lot culturally. And of course, being so egocentric as I am, I never thought of it as being cultural until I get together, like I was last week, with people from Chicago and people from Philadelphia and people from Washington. And when we all get together and we talk about something and they say, oh, she's doing that New York thing again. But it gives us a frame of reference. And it's also very, very important that we get together with people that are different than we are. That's where we started off today.
Yeah.
With you saying, this is the way I see
intuition.
Intuition. Yeah. And that's really significant. That's really very, very important. Because everything is a piece of the puzzle. Everything is a piece of the puzzle. I was listening, so interesting, we talk about intuition. As you know, for those of you that don't know, just bought a condo here in Costa Rica. And I was talking to the man that owns the whole
complex
development, right? Yeah. And he was not feeling well. And so last night I got this email from him saying, this is how I am making myself feel better. This is the podcast I'm listening to. And he sent me this podcast of two professors talking about Socrates and investigative discourse with people looking for the truth, like there is a truth. And as the conversation went on, they were talking about, well, Socrates and this questioning of yourself all the time, and this, and when we talk about Socrates, how he would talk to people and say, what's the truth about that? And then he'd bring in another idea, and are we aligned with this in everything we do, or did we really know the truth? And he would keep examining and examining. And then he would say, well, I'm smarter than you because I know I don't know. And you don't know either. But what he said is, the thing that's so important about it is that it's not really about asking somebody else. It's not really about putting down somebody saying, you don't know. Mm-hmm. It really is a way for us to question ourselves. and to know that we really don't know, and to keep that examination of our being in alignment with ourselves, with our own truth, and allowing that sense of knowing, that sense of truth to change. As we mature and develop, allowing it to become part of a bigger picture and allowing it to develop. And getting back to the topic of instinct, I think in my life, my experience of instinct is there have been times where I just wanted to do something. Didn't know why, didn't know what it was for. When I went into ministry, I had no idea what I was doing with it, but I knew I needed to go to this seminary and take this program. And I had no clue. So, but I went. I know sometimes I know I need to know something, and
It's like a piece of the puzzle. Somehow inside of us, we know there is something about a piece of a puzzle, but we don't know what that is.
right. And my whole idea of what ministry was so different from what I would explain to you about what ministry is today.
And so, what is ministry?
At this moment, for me, is understanding that I don't know so much. Understanding that it is a bigger picture and that people make up things that guide their lives. And if it guides their lives in a positive way, that's good. And if it undermines their lives and shuts them down, I would rather not be a part of that. Mm-hmm. Or it's not the way I see things. It may be the way they see things at the moment. There were parts of my life where I needed to be shut down and have steps of clarity in some sense of the concept of knowing something. And it worked.
And what I see you doing a lot is really sharing and guiding. Like even in the group that we have with our women's group with the books, you really have a way of guiding people to have another look inside or to look at a different path.
Right, because when you know that you don't know, you can be supportive. Yeah. When you think you know something, then you shut down other people.
Right. So
and if we're all part of the spirit, everybody is significant.
Yes, and that's what I love, is bringing out everybody's own wisdom. So having a way for people to be able to bring their own inner knowing out and take a look at it.
And the thing that's so interesting is it's made up of a group of women, and sometimes somebody over here thinks something that's so helpful to someone over there that has absolutely nothing to do with my concept or anything.
Right.
And everybody gets to hear what it is that they need. It's like everybody bringing all of their food to the table, and then everybody being able to take what they want from the smorgasbord without you shutting down somebody and saying, oh, you can only have that or you can only have that. You know?
And it reminds me of the work with the horses, that they're facilitating in a way that just brings out our own wisdom and allows us to find our own path rather than somebody telling us.
And to know that the horse also has wisdom and a path. Yeah. And that we spend so much time thinking that we're better than, that we don't listen. That's probably why we're in so much trouble now as a human race, because we've been given everything, and the plants and the trees and the sky and the rocks and the mountains. We've been given everything, and somebody decided they were smarter than all of it and refused to listen.
Right. And I think that's the difference too, like what your work is and the work that I do with the horses is that we get to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes all the difference. And it sounds crazy that it's just that, but it makes all the difference just to be heard.
Right.
So, yeah, no, I get that.
And to also know that we are just a speck, and that the whole is made up of all these contributions. And our contribution is not greater or lesser than anybody else's.
Right.
It's simply what we're called to contribute. It's like the little ants that you see carrying the little piece of something over to the anthill. Everybody carries their own little piece.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're all a part of the bigger oneness, and we all have our little piece. And so just bringing this back to us following our path rather than doing what might be what somebody else wants us to do or what might be logical. And so just bringing that back, that sometimes...
Might be logical to who?
Well, that it might not be logical for me to follow my intuition about, like you were saying, it's like you didn't know what you were going to do with ministry. You just knew you wanted to do that. So I think all of us have those experiences where we're not really sure what that's about. And if I tell somebody, they might say, what are you doing? That is so crazy. That is not going to bring you, it's not going to make you a living. It's not going to, it's like, why would you do that?
I knew since I was 5 years old I wanted to be a minister.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. There's so many places we can go with this, because then I have the thought of, usually by the time that we're 7, we all really do know what our passion is and what our purpose is. Mm-hmm. And you want to talk about that a little bit? You have some insight on what we know as children and being able to look back at that, maybe. And I think there's something in there about our own judgments about ourselves.
I think the reasons that I wanted to be a part of ministry in my younger life had nothing to do with ministry. It had to do with control.
Wow, already at that age. Wow.
And, because my life was out of control. My father died. My mother was trying to sort out the pieces. My brother was very fragmented and upset about so many things. And I really wanted to know something.
Were you raised with religion? Were you already going to church? And
No, I was raised in a secular household. My mother had been born into an Orthodox Jewish family. My father was very secular, so our living was a very secular Jewish kind of religion, but the household was so dysfunctional that it was clearly not a God that was working for anybody in the household.
And how did you get the idea then that you wanted to be a minister?
I went looking for a different kind of religion or a God that worked.
Okay.
And I would listen to the people that were in the pulpit or in Judaism. I would listen, when I went to a synagogue, of people talking and thinking, why should they make up stuff for me to believe. Why shouldn't I be making up stuff? Why not my idea?
Wow.
You know. And I think that was like one of the themes of my life, was where people were grown-ups would say stuff and not ask me my opinion. And I would think, why not what I think? Why are we, you know? And I had an incredible mother, but she was so busy trying to hold things together that me being the little bumpkin on the log, I was not consulted as much as I would like to have been. And I remember thinking as a child, I have a thought, you know, how come nobody cares what I think?
Right.
And so I grew up wanting everybody to know what I think. But so I had to get over that hump in life. That became one of the things that I needed to, because that began to shut me down as a human being. And I had to get over that sense of I know something, to this understanding of this greater spiritual, divine thing I am a part of.
Right.
And not creating and making up for other people to have to believe in.
Right.
And I think other parts of other religions are on the same continuum of developing that maturity, of going to a place of saying, you know what, we only get one day at a time to live, and we do the best that we can with it. We try to be kind to other people. If we're not kind, we try to see how we're so scared that we're afraid of letting go enough to be kind to open to someone else. Mm-hmm. And we keep moving through it, and somewhere behind that whole thing, we trust that our intuition will take us to the next place in our journey where we need to be. But I've had those moments in time where somebody has opened the door. We were talking about this the other day, where I went to see somebody once because I was involved in something medical. And the person I had to go to see, opened the door, and it was an apartment that had pots of lotus all across the walls, and this huge quartz pyramid on the table, and the guy said to me, "Do you know why you're here?" Now this was a point in my life where I was the most rigid, and I just looked at him and said, "Yes, I do." And I could just feel like all that rigidity melt away. And he gave me this huge shopping bag of books written by Elizabeth Montgomery, and said, "This is information you need to have. I'm never going to see you again." And he began to tell me, this is about, what was it, 30 years up until then or something, 37. And he said, and you need this. Opened up a whole new doorway for me. Now, I didn't plan to be there. I didn't know why. But those things happen in life.
This was not the person you were going to see. This was somebody else that answered the door.
I was going to see him to draw blood for a guy that was a nutritionist that was going to do blood tests on him.
And this was not the guy that answered the door?
This was the guy that answered the door.
Oh, okay, same guy, okay.
And said, "Do you know why you're here?" And It was like clearly not about drawing his blood, which I ended up doing, but it was clearly about, he knew or was expecting me to spiritually to show up.
Right.
Fascinating.
Okay, and so some people have a higher knowing than others. Some people are more in tune So, like, for him to get the message that he had things that he had to give you, and that this was going to turn
I have no idea.
right.
Because I found out later who he was, and there was some like really positive things about him, and there were really some negative things about him.
Sure.
And I think that's true of all of us.
Yeah.
We're cleaning up if we allow it.
A lifetime of cleaning up.
A cleanup lifetime.
A cleanup lifetime. Okay, now speaking of lifetimes, what about past lives? And is that, do you think if we are in tune with past lives, do you think that that has an influence on what our path is now?
For me, and I think we can only speak for ourselves, but for me, I think it has a profound
A connection or
connection to my sense of knowing in this life, or instinctively feeling that something's comfortable or not. And I think we all do that in some way or another. Now, for those of you out there who, don't know me, don't know us, right? We would like to know you, mind you, but for those of you that don't know us, the sense of, and I would bet that this happened to you, where you meet somebody and you feel like you've known them forever. Little things like that. You wish for something and it just shows up. And I think you have to be a little open to it, because you have to be open to acknowledging that you really like somebody or care about somebody. I mean, you can't be so defensive that you're so shut down that you want to go think about everything because you're so afraid of getting hurt. And I think there are some people that are still in that position. And if you're in that position still, please go to talk to somebody about it. Go and know that there's something greater that you belong to, and that you don't want to be as closed or as fearful as you are. And I think the fact that people are closed and fearful, it's not your fault. I think you need to know that. I think people are programmed. And as much as that was going on in my house, my mother was very intuitive and very smart and very caring, and knew how much she could help, and got us help as children, knowing that sometimes she couldn't. But the thing is, so if you're very afraid of people and you don't want to let anybody in, you're not going to hear the person that opens the door, because you're going to be too afraid. So if you feel angry all the time, the anger has to do with being frightened. And anger has to do with being protective of yourself. And it also has to do with your experiences of people that could not be trusted, or people that were hurtful. But as we started out saying about a little while ago, we talked about that you have to be open to allowing these experiences in. And you also are going to repeat what you know. So if you are living a life where you are repeating not to be able to trust anybody, or to be around people that are angry all the time, or to be angry yourself all the time, if you keep repeating that, get somebody, hire somebody. That this is what therapy is about. Hire somebody under the federal law of confidentiality that cannot repeat what you're going to tell them, so that they can help you unlock the door and make different choices in life. Because you're not going to, if you don't trust anybody outside of you, you're probably not going to trust you inside of you. Likewise, if you don't trust you inside of you, you are probably not going to trust anybody outside of you. And so you're not going to be open into this intuitive world where you expect good, or where you can use an experience that looks like it's negative and see how incredibly useful it is to you in just knowing how you want to make different choices next time, or how you want to choose things that you trust. Sometimes people have had such awful experiences with other people, or not known how to relate to other people, that they like to just go live in nature. And God bless them, that's great. Because they probably hear more than the average person. But motivation has a lot to do with it.
Being motivated ourselves.
Of why we're somewhere, whether we're running away from or we're running to freedom.
Right. Yeah, the person living alone might be their freedom.
Or it might be their isolation.
Yeah. I like what you said about the key that unlocks the door. So, and this is something that I noticed in my life too. As soon as I realized I could make choices about how I'm feeling or how my thoughts are going. So I recognize, wow, I'm having some pretty negative thoughts, and it's going down a negative trail, and it gets more and more negative as it goes. To have the choice to stop that and to look at something that might not look very positive and turn it around. I see you do that all the time. You're always like, something goes wrong and you go, that's okay. So they're not showing up today, then that means that there's something else is going to happen.
I want to point out to the people out there that she loves me. So when I do things that are absolutely bonkers, she's sure that I have the most wonderful motive behind it, and not that I'm just nuts about something where I'm out of control.
Yeah, that's funny. But no, I really do see that you do take anything that might be really negative for somebody else, and you look at it as, it's not a problem. I'll figure that out. It will be okay. And that's the difference in the choice of how we look at it. So for somebody else, it would be a catastrophe and would ruin their whole day. But for you, it's like, that's okay.
Yeah. But after I jump up and down. However, I think the difference is that when I jump up and down because I'm out of control over something, I don't take myself seriously.
Right.
It's not that I'm not reactive, because I'm not dead yet. I'm so reactive. But when I'm reactive, it's more of a just look at that. I don't get caught up with thinking that it's so important that I'm reactive. It's just simply saying, look, I can be as crazy as the next person.
Yeah, but it's
then I can give myself pause to say how are we going to move forward.
Right. But it's being in the observer position. Mm-hmm. So not following something, getting crazy over something. It's like, that's okay, that happened. Like we all do, but that there's
a greater plan.
There's a greater plan and a bigger picture, and we can look at it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key for all of us to grow, is to really be able to see ourselves from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And
there was an exercise I used to do when I was significantly upset about something. And it was seeing myself climbing up the mountain, getting to the top, and then leaning backwards and falling into the arms of God.
oh wow.
Yeah. There are different kinds of things that come to you sometime to just not take your reactions, even when you're frightened. You know, it's not that I don't get frightened sometimes, but just knowing there's always a bigger picture. And I think it has to do with living long enough that you've lived through a lot of the things that you've been frightened of. And knowing that it worked out in the end. There's something wonderful about being older. You know, every 10 years gets easier and easier.
Oh, wow.
Because you've experienced more things that you haven't liked and found out that they were not what you expected and that you're okay. You're still okay. I'm still here.
Yeah.
And many of the things that I wanted a long time ago, it's like I don't feel like you can give up something until you've experienced it. You know, it's easy to choose to live in poverty when you've never had anything. But to make a choice to give something to whatever you believe in, and to make a choice to tithe, to make a choice to give to charity, to share yourself with something else means that you have to have something to share. And so that as the older you get, the more you have to share because the more you've experienced. And so it becomes easier and easier because it's been a good experience to shed. It's been a good experience to know you don't need so much. The world now is in a very interesting place, especially in the United States, where people are so frantically into materialism that they don't have time to think.
Right.
And they're constantly in a state of winning or losing and not understanding the significance. You know, I think about football players. I think about athletes that have spent their whole lives honing their bodies and working so hard, building their muscles. And then they have a game, and based on that game, they're either worth something or worth nothing.
Yeah.
And I think there's such a little step. And that person that didn't win that particular game still has that magnificent body, still has still has something that needs to be really recognized and profoundly. And I think that that's the key. I think that when we are less than what we expect to be, or when it's less than what we wanted something to turn out, to keep remembering how magnificent we are and that we've been stretched in trying, that we've been stretched in thinking,
Right.
that we've been stretched in caring. And those stretches are just as important or even more important than attaining what we thought was important.
The programming, so that we're not just subjected to the programming, that we have a different way of looking at it. That's not failure and not winning or losing.
All right.
Yeah. And I think it helps to have some role models talking about this and that we can watch go through these experiences, that there's another way to look at this. There's another way to be.
When you listen to us today, I hope that we don't sound like this a year from now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And to be willing to let go of everything that you know right in this moment and know that you'll be carried to and see things differently from the people that impact your lives in the next moment. And you don't have to like it all, but I would prefer it.
Super. And on that note, let's draw this to a close. And there's anything that you wanted to add for information for anybody, or if there's something, maybe contact for you, or is there some website or something that...
Well, my website is always www.spiritualsearch.org. My dream, as you know, is to develop a practice in psycho-spiritual counseling. And we have some plans to do some of that. I much rather see people in person and, and feel their energy and share energy. It's about sharing, and it's about people hearing themselves, not just hearing me. I don't know if I've answered your question about intuition at all.
I think we did. I think we kind of just wound around a lot of different topics, but it was all really about what's coming from our heart. Mm-hmm. And following that. And you're a great example of that. And I just wanted to bring up one thing that yesterday I heard you on the telephone telling somebody, if you want to come and be with me,
we were having breakfast in a very yuppie place. Yes. Because we couldn't find any place open. Yes, and so what it was somebody calling me for counseling, and wanting to tell me about how they wanted everybody else to be. And so what I ended up saying to them is, if you are willing to make some changes about you, come and see me, or about the way you see things, or about what you want to do.
For yourself,
come see me. But if you want me to try to fix everybody around you, I'm probably not the best person for you.
Yeah, and it was just wonderful to hear that clarity from you. It's like, I am totally available for you if you want to sit down and have a session with you, that we can have some more clarity, and this could be a wonderful experience, but you're not going to fix everybody around for somebody. Right. And just that clarity of, here, I'm your girl. If that's what you want to do, I'm your girl. Come and talk to me. And I loved it. It was just so clear.
But again, this gets back to what we were talking about at the beginning. It's about our relationship with things. So if we're in relationship with something and we don't want to be in relationship with it, it's about us. It's about why we were in relationship with it. And it doesn't mean that what we thought at the beginning of why we were in relationship with something is not about not valuing why we are in relationship with it. Sometimes, we think we don't like something, and we have to understand why it is we're drawn to it. But ultimately, it's about us. It's not
our lessons in life. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. And our pathways. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ellyn. And that was a wonderful conversation, and we hope you all enjoyed it.